A 24 male and my ex, 23 female, were together for about 2 years when she cheated on me. She was the epitome of a good Christian girl. She was in the church choir, she volunteered at the daycare of the church that ran for lower-income members, and she was very devout in her religion. I wasn't raised around religion the way that she was. My parents would bring me to church on major holidays, and that was about it. Every now and then we would go on a Sunday, but it wasn't a priority for my family. I met my girlfriend at an Easter service. I thought she was cute, but I didn't feel like church was the right place to hit on someone. There was a picnic after the service, so I decided that I would strike up a conversation with her then. When I got to know her, I learned that her religion was very important to her. She was extremely devout and valued her relationship with God more than anything. Because I wasn't religious, I thought it would pose some problems in our relationship. However, it was easy for us to get through at first. When we weren't living together, everything was fine. We saw each other whenever we could, but she still prioritized her faith. I would like to point out that she was also abstinent and waiting until marriage. We did other stuff that I won't get into. I loved her and genuinely thought about getting married to her. Originally, she didn't even want to live with a man until she was married. I didn't want to propose to someone without living with them first. I figured it would serve as a nice trial before committing to someone forever. We had a long talk, and we decided that we would rent an apartment together. There were a lot of boundaries in place, so she could keep her vow of abstinence. I never realized just how much time she spent at church until we were living together. As I mentioned, my family wasn't particularly religious, so I didn't join her most of the time. If anything, I considered myself agnostic, and it wasn't something I was willing to budge on. We were living together, our different religious outlooks became an issue. She was constantly trying to get me to go to services that she was attending. She was pressuring me to read through the Bible, and she was questioning why I felt the way that I did about religion. It started to seem like she wasn't okay with dating a non-religious person after all. I could see that our relationship was going downhill, and it was disheartening. I felt strongly about her, and I thought it was a shame that we weren't able to put those differences aside. However, I wanted to work on it because I did care about her. We ended up taking a short break. We weren't broken up, but we were separating to take some time for both of us and evaluate the relationship. I stayed in the apartment, and she stayed with her parents again. We met up a couple of weeks later and decided we really cared about each other and were going to give it a try. We changed a lot of behaviors that the other person wasn't thrilled about, and it seemed like things were going better. She stopped talking to me about a lot of the religious things that had been bothering me before. She joined a youth group that met on Thursday nights, so she would have some like-minded friends to talk to about her faith. I thought that was a great idea. She kept going, and everything was repairing itself with our relationship. All the doubts that I had before were going away, and I was seriously considering proposing. I went with her to church for an Easter service, as I had always done with my family before. While we were there, she introduced me to a lot of the church friends she had that I didn't know. She also introduced me to the youth pastor she spent a lot of time with in the youth group. Just to clarify, because I know when I say youth group, people are probably imagining teenagers and children. The youth group was for young adults, so it was mostly people in their early 20s. Right away, I noticed how friendly they were with each other. It rubbed me the wrong way. I noticed he didn't hug any other members, but he hugged my girlfriend. Something in her demeanor also shifted, and she kept looking over at him and blushing. I thought she must have had a little crush on him. He was a good-looking guy, but she was steadfast in her beliefs, so I didn't imagine they were doing anything. When we got home later that night, I teased her about it. She told me that I was silly for thinking she would have her eyes on any other man. At the time, I was confident in our relationship, so I believed her. Plus, he was a pastor at the church. I assumed he would have decent enough morals not to go after someone in a relationship. One day, she told me that she was thinking about going on a mission trip with her youth group. They were flying out of the country to help rebuild houses in a low-income area that was badly affected by a tropical storm. She had been telling me about how much she wanted to go on a mission trip like that, and I was supportive of it. I told her that if it would make her feel good about something she was doing, she should go for it. She decided to go, and I said goodbye to her about a month later when she left. We made plans to talk every night and message each other regularly. Because she drove to the church, she left her car in the parking lot to drive it back when she returned. I figured it was safe, but I stopped by one day after work just to check on it myself. When I got there, I didn't see her car anywhere. Immediately, I assumed that it had either been towed or someone had stolen it when they saw it sitting there for a while. I went inside and looked for someone who might be able to help me figure out what happened. I actually found the pastor's wife, and I asked her if there were any surveillance cameras or anything in the parking lot to see what happened to her car. I explained that my girlfriend had left it in the lot when she left for the mission trip. The pastor's wife didn't know anything about a mission trip. She thought I was in the wrong church. I explained everything that my girlfriend told me, even naming the youth pastor that she was going with. The pastor and his wife both told me that they had no mission trip planned for that youth group. I knew then that my girlfriend had lied to me about the mission trip in general. If she wasn't on the trip, where was she? I had known her to be a nice, honest girl, and that wasn't adding up with the person that I knew. She wouldn't have lied about going on a trip like that. I was still talking to her, and she was FaceTiming with me, so I knew she was okay. I just couldn't figure out why she lied. I did some digging online, and I found some people who had gone through some similar things with their partners lying about trips. It all boiled down to cheating. My initial thought was that something was going on with the youth pastor. I didn't know where she was, but I needed some kind of confirmation about what she was doing. I was able to do this thing where I made a custom link for something I found online and shared it with her. When she clicked on the link, I could see exactly where she clicked on it from. I drove to the location, and I saw her car sitting right in the driveway of a small house. There were a ton of crosses and flags with Bible verses on them in the yard, so I figured I was right to suspect the youth pastor of something. I didn't want to just knock on the door and see what was going on, so I stayed outside for a little while and kept an eye on it. Eventually, I saw both of them walking out of the house holding hands and getting into his car. I followed them to a restaurant outside of town where they clearly went on a date. They drove home not long after. I waited outside his house for a while, contemplating what to do. I heard them laughing outside while I was there, so I got out of the car to walk around to the backyard. I was able to peek over a fence to see both of them inside of a hot tub. Both of them were completely naked, and my girlfriend was straddling him. From the sounds of it, they were having sex. She hadn't even had sex with me, and we'd been together for a couple of years at that point. I took a quick picture as proof so I could bring it up to her so she wouldn't try and lie about it. I went home and pretended like everything was normal until she got back. The following Sunday, when she was getting ready to go to church, I went with her. She was surprised, but it seemed to make her happy. If she knew the real reason I was going, she wouldn't have been. At the end of every church sermon, the pastor opened the floor for people to say something nice or read a Bible verse to the rest of the churchgoers. My girlfriend was surprised to see me get up and speak. I introduced myself to the church, and I told them that I didn't know much about religion. I mentioned that my girlfriend was very devout and involved in the church. I even told them that I was considering marrying her. Everybody thought that was sweet and looked at my girlfriend with smiles. Then I brought up a passage from the Bible about adultery. I looked at my girlfriend at that moment, and I saw her face go pale. I told them I was excited that my girlfriend was going on a mission trip, only to find out that the mission trip was a lie. Then I explained the entire story to them. Everybody in the room was murmuring to themselves, looking between my girlfriend and the youth pastor. The actual pastor walked me away from the microphone and out of the church. He told me that he understood I was upset, but that wasn't the place to have a conversation like that. I had done everything I needed to, so I didn't really care. I went home and my girlfriend arrived about a half hour later. She yelled and screamed at me for humiliating her in front of people. I told her that she was a liar, and I had done so much to make sure she was comfortable and in the relationship, and she turned her back on me to sleep with another man. She told me that she was spiritually connected to him, and their relationship differed from ours. I told her that wasn't an excuse. If she wanted to be with him, she should have just broken up with me. I would have understood if our religion and faith were a big issue in the relationship. I told her that she needed to get out of the apartment as soon as possible. She ended up moving out to go live with her parents. I got some calls from them about how angry they were that I aired her dirty laundry at church like that. Apparently, everybody was making her feel very uncomfortable there, so she ended up leaving the church. The same thing happened to the youth pastor. A lot of the members frowned upon his actions and pulled their children out of his group. On top of that, a lot of the young adults that he worked with stopped visiting him. The church ended up looking for a new youth pastor to try and move away from the scandal all of that created. OP, the fact that she lied about going on a mission trip just to be with him is crazy. That was a major lie. She pretended to be helping others when in reality she was shacked up with the youth pastor at his house. It's a shame that she threw away what she had with you because of her desire to be with him. If the spiritual connection she had with him was so much stronger than what she had with you, she could have come to you and told you that. Breaking up is always the better option in a relationship. I'm glad that you were able to figure out what happened and get away from her before you proposed and dedicated your life to her. Now, let's move on to our next story. My wife and I had been together for about 3 years. We met at a movie theater where we both had matinee tickets to see a film. We were the only ones in the entire audience. Before it started, I saw her and thought she was cute. I moved over and sat down next to her, and we struck up a conversation before the movie started. When the film ended, I asked her to grab coffee with me so we could discuss the movie together. We exchanged numbers later that day, and we started dating. We both lived in the city in small studio apartments that we hated. We moved in together about 8 months into dating because we felt very strongly about each other. Plus, with our shared income, we could afford a 1-bedroom apartment that was much bigger. We were able to buy furniture for the first time since living in the city, and were very excited about that. Neither of us had the best jobs in the world. We loved each other, and we thought that was really what mattered. The little extra money that we had we would use for experiences that we could do together, like concerts, movies, festivals, you name it. We didn't have a lot of money in savings at that point. A few months into living together, I said we should just get married. She went with it, and a few days later, we were signing papers to the courthouse. It didn't make much of a difference in our relationship, but just knowing we were married was nice. I got offered a job that paid a good deal more than what I was making in the city. We didn't want to move away because we loved the city life, but I couldn't turn down the job. One of the best things about the job was that I would work for 2 weeks straight, 10 hours a day every day, then I would have 3 weeks off. It paid well, but it only paid once a month. We figured out a way for me to take this job and not have to leave the city. Essentially, I was booking a 2-week stay at a hotel and working, then coming back home for the 3 weeks that I was off. We knew that it was going to be a challenge for the first few months because of the extra money we'd be spending on hotels. We figured we could cut back on some things to make that work. Then when we caught up and good money was coming in, we could start splurging again. My wife wasn't crazy about it. I wasn't giving her luxury bags or meals at 3-star restaurants, but we had the money to go out when we wanted to. During my first stint on the job, my wife kept complaining to me about how bored she was all the time and how she wished I hadn't taken the job. I was frustrated that she couldn't just suck it up for a few months while I did something that would change our lives with how much extra money we would have. About a week into my first work trip, I got a weird message from a friend. We were pretty close, but in recent months drifted away from each other. They messaged me and asked if anything had happened between my wife and me. I was confused, and I told them that everything was fine. I was just away working on the new job. I asked about why they thought something was off, and they told me they were at a restaurant and positive they saw my wife with another man on a date. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told them that they must have been wrong, but they told me they took a picture just to be sure. They sent it to me, and it was my wife. I called my wife right away and asked her about it. She told me that it was a work meeting she was at and that I was overthinking it. I was suspicious, but she had never given me a reason to doubt her in the past, so I was more apt to take her word for it over the friend. I texted the friend and explained everything, then they apologized for overstepping their bounds. I returned home for my 3-week stay there, and everything seemed normal with my wife for the first week. During the other 2 weeks, I noticed that she was on her phone a lot more than usual. She was also taking a lot of selfies, which was strange for her. I was curious about who she was sending these pictures to if it wasn't me. I took a mental note of her Snapchat score one day, and I checked it about a week later, and it had increased by over 100. I kept an eye on it while I was away for my next 2-week stint at work, and it was steadily increasing, more than it was when I checked it while I was home, and she wasn't sending me anything on Snapchat at all. I was in my head about why the score was changing so much, so I did a quick Google search to see if there were some obvious reasons. Almost everything I found confirmed that she was sending and receiving messages. From everything I gathered with other people asking these questions, they were concerned that their partners were cheating. When I got home after work, I kept that thought in the back of my head, but I didn't say anything. I didn't have any proof, and telling her that I noticed her Snapchat score increasing was going to make me look crazy and jealous. The first opportunity I had to take a look at her phone, I jumped at it. She was in the shower, and she left it sitting on the bed. When I looked through it, I found 3 major things. The first was that she had an app downloaded to help sugar daddies find people to date. Her profile showed her in skimpy dresses and lingerie showing off her body. Dozens of men were messaging her. Some even sent her money on Venmo to prove they were the real deal. The second thing I noticed was dozens of Snapchat messages from men with nicknames like Ben Defense Attorney Tesla and others like that. She was exchanging nudes with the men on Snapchat. The third thing was her text message exchanges with some of the men. She had clearly met up with at least 3 of them. They had taken her to fancy restaurants and bought her new clothes and things for the house. I hadn't noticed the things before, but when I looked around I saw them. Through the messages, I figured out she brought one guy back to our apartment and had sex with him in our bed. I was furious with what I saw. It was obvious it was some kind of retaliation against the spending cuts we were doing while my job was new. She wanted fancy dinners and expensive wine, so she lied and stabbed me in the back. I sent myself a bunch of screenshots and videos of the things that I'd seen so I could have them for our impending divorce. There was no way I was going to be staying with her and sending all of the money that I was earning at my new job to her when she was doing that. I spent the rest of my time at home secretly looking for another apartment closer to my job. I didn't want anything to do with her, and I didn't even want to be in the city because it reminded me of her so much. When the time came for me to go back to work, my wife really had no idea I was leaving for good. I took a lot of things out while she was at work, so she wouldn't notice me taking everything out of the apartment. When I got there, I moved into a new apartment and took my wife's name off of my bank account. I have been looking for a divorce attorney while I was still in the city. I had papers, and I was sending them to her in the mail. I got off work one night and looked at my phone to see I had dozens of missed calls and text messages from her. She had received the petition for divorce in the mail, and that explained everything about why I wanted a divorce. She didn't know why I was accusing her of cheating. I sent her a text message telling her everything I knew and a couple of screenshots I had taken. Apparently, she was going to sue me for going through her private property. I didn't know how well that would hold up in court. We ended up going through with the divorce, and I was able to get my name off of the lease in the city, so she was solely responsible for it. I posted about the divorce on our social media before she commented on anything, so I could have the narrative in my own hands. I had a gut feeling she was going to try and blame the separation on me, so I wanted to get ahead of it. We were divorced, and I didn't owe her anything in spousal support, but I figured she was still getting a lot of her money from the men she was seeing. I had a few of their phone numbers from the screenshots that I had gathered. I threw all of them into a group chat, and I sent a message telling them that my ex-wife was married to me when she was with them, and that she was talking to countless men and taking their money. Some of them didn't care about it. They probably assumed that was what was happening anyway. But it seemed like a couple of them thought that they were in something serious with her. I hoped they would cut things off with her. That would be ideal, so she would not have any of these men paying for her things anymore. She called me a few days after that and cursed me out over the phone for ruining her relationships. She probably lost out on a nice sum of money from the men she was stringing along. I felt bad for them in some ways, but at the same time, they were on a sugar daddy dating website, so they had to know what they were getting into. Now, I live closer to my job, so I'm not having to commute back and forth, which is great. I have a nice apartment, and I'm making a decent living. It's been about a year since all this happened, so I'm getting back out into dating and hoping for the best. OP, it's great that your friend sent you that picture when they found her with the first guy. Not a lot of people would do that, and that seems to be a catalyst for you discovering this whole other life she was living while you were away. It's honestly disgusting that she would bring them back to your own apartment and sleep with them there. I understand it's probably safer for her to do it there rather than going to a virtual stranger's house, but it's very disrespectful. I'm glad that you messaged the men that she was talking to. I would bet that many of them thought they were the only ones she was talking to. It seems like she was lying and misleading quite a few of them. I would assume that none of them knew she was married. Hopefully, that did affect the income she was making from all of that, and she will look back and regret what she did. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.